And it's all gone so well.
Very pleased to be here. Excited to welcome Sarah Maclean, joint CEO of Skills England, to the stage. And we have got the Q&A questions coming in through the app, so please do put your questions in and we can put them to Sarah. But to start off, Skills England's quite new, recently announced. You've been in the role a few months. Just tell us what you're tasked with. What's your job? What's your role going to be to deliver for government?
Well, first of all, Claire, thank you. Huge thanks for inviting me to be part of today. It's fantastic to be here and see some familiar faces, but also lots of new faces, and put some names to those I haven't met before. It's great to be here to talk about skills. Skills England, as you rightly say, is new, a new government arm's length body announced by the Prime Minister last July, and we are now up and running. And will be fully formed once we welcome colleagues from IFATE, the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, at the beginning of June into the organisation, along with some other teams from the department who are joining. Or Frank, you've already met Frank, who asked the question earlier, and his data and insight team, and a regional team. So there's a bunch of people coming together to form this new organisation. And really delighted and excited to be leading it with my co-CEO, job share of 17 years, Tessa Griffiths, which is really exciting. So yes, it's a new and exciting opportunity to really make some impact, I think, on the skills agenda. But we can talk about that a bit more as we go through this conversation.
So what are you forming now? What's your mandate from government? What are you being tasked with delivering?
So I suppose there are sort of three main themes to the things that we are really keen that we manage through the work of Skills England. Obviously, it's early days, and part of the purpose of coming out and talking to you here today and other sectors is to make sure that what we do is informed by what the skills needs are in different sectors and different organisations. But I think there are kind of three main themes that I just wanted to mention and hope they make sense to you, but really happy to go into them in more detail if helpful. The first is really about understanding the nation's skills. So I think there's a lot of talk about skills, there's a lot of conversations about skills needs, but as Frank will have made clear in his question, all working from the same data and understanding what the problems are, really evidence-driven, so that we can have a shared understanding of what the challenges are and help to address those through improved skills offer is a really key thing for Skills England. The second main theme is around simplifying. So one of the criticisms, I think, of the skills system is it's quite complicated to understand. As a mum with an 18-year-old who's recently been through trying to work out what they want to do in the next bit of their life as they leave school, it is quite complicated and it's quite difficult to explain to people what the different pathways are. So one of the key things that Skills England will be doing is simplifying and making access and pathways easier to understand and navigate to help eventually, the overarching aim of boosting economic growth. And then the third thing, just briefly, is around mobilising, co-creation, working with employers to come up with the solutions. So it's not a government kind of agency coming up with answers on its own, but really working collaboratively with industry to come up with the right solutions and then have some action on those.
Thanks. So you've got quite a big job.
Yeah, sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah.
And how are you going to measure success? Do you have an idea yet of what good looks like in this space?
So I think if we manage to do some of those three things, I think we've already achieved some things in the sort of setup phase, publishing the first Skills England report, the sort of State of the Nation skills need report. So continuing to do that to make data transparent and available to everybody, that will be one big success criteria. If we can do some of that simplification, stripping out unnecessary bureaucracy, if we can make things simpler and demonstrate that has happened, I think that will be another key thing. But the proof will be in whether occupations are filled, those jobs that people are finding it difficult to find skilled people to fill, or the gaps in the skills provision to upskill current members of the workforce. If we can plug those gaps and demonstrate that we have been able to do that, then I think that will be a huge success.
Good. And I note there on the kind of vacancies filled, one of the challenges with financial services is reskilling the existing workforce and making sure that people coming into the industry have got the skills they need. So it's your Skills England, not Jobs England. So how are you going to play into that space of ensuring skills gaps are closed as well as job vacancies are filled?
Yeah, I think our mission is really around better skills for better jobs.
Right.
So making sure that collectively we understand what the skills gaps are, whether that is, I know, congratulations on the publication of your report today around AI and skills needs there. I think one of the challenges, but also a big opportunity for Skills England working with people such as yourselves, is to find agile ways in which we can plug those digital and AI type gaps, because existing processes and ways in which traditionally we've come up with training courses, by the time you've finished writing the spec, it's already out of date in digital or AI context. So we're going to have to work really in a very smart, agile, new way to be able to do that, and really want to make sure we co-create those solutions to those sorts of skills gaps together with you and others in the room.
Okay, no, thank you. Good to hear. That kind of brings us nicely on to something that was raised earlier. So the point was made about new technologies, agentic AI, etc., and having to build some of the solutions. The responsiveness has to be really fast, and how do we build that in? And that brings me on to apprenticeships. Can't talk with you and not mention apprenticeships. Apprenticeships were reformed about 10 years ago, and the levy was introduced at that time. So what do you see as what works and what doesn't work with the current structure of apprenticeships?
So it's a really good question, and I'm really pleased that there are some people in the room who are total experts on this. I think Nikki Christie, who leads the financial services apprenticeship standard at the back of the room. Do you want to give people a wave, Nikki? So listening and part of this joint endeavour to make sure we're getting things right. But I think so over the last 10 years, it feels as though the apprenticeship system has really matured, and we're in a very different phase now of people having greater faith in the quality of apprenticeships, people also kind of understanding of what they are, what they can do, what they can't do, the fact that they've been really employer-led, worked up with those experts who know what's needed in terms of apprenticeship standards and assessment, etc. I think we're now at a point where we've listened to calls for greater flexibility. That some apprenticeship standards maybe take a bit too long to complete. So responding to those calls for flexibility, announcements around things like shorter apprenticeships, so no longer needing to be 12 months in duration, but could be 8 months. Foundation apprenticeships, for example, thinking about ways in which the apprenticeships, not without moving away from the quality and the sort of trusted brand of apprenticeships, but thinking about ways in which we can be a bit more flexible. And I guess you might want to also ask about the Growth in Skills Levy offer itself and how that might move into this space too. So we're hearing very loud and clear from different sectors, including your own, that there's a kind of need for shorter, sharper, perhaps modular approaches to some of this training, and we're really hearing that and understanding that is an ask. And so I suppose our sort of response and ask back is, can we work together on what that should look like for your sector? What is it that is really needed, and can respond to that shorter, sharper interventions that might be needed, particularly, for example, when you talk about upskilling existing members of the workforce.
Okay. And how does you'll be balancing the demands of an industrial strategy that's being developed and the other political priorities from the government? So how much freedom have you got to produce, introduce more flexibilities, more of that modularisation, and what sort of challenges are you getting back from ministers? on this agenda?
Yeah, so our job and one of the interesting things about Skills England's setup and sort of constitution as an executive agency is that it's closer to ministers, closer to government than what's gone before. So having those conversations with ministers and being able to give this kind of real-time feedback in what each of the industrial strategy sectors is telling us. But one of our main jobs, I think, in Skills England is to talk to and convene sessions with sectors and members of sectors. So whether it's through your organisation or individuals, listen, understand, and feedback to ministers. So it's this feedback loop back into the department to say, so there's an ask for more flexibility. Okay, what does that mean? Getting under the bonnet of what that really means and saying to ministers, this is what we're hearing, here are some ideas. This has worked in other areas, other bits of the UK or internationally. We think this might be able to work here because, and kind of coming up with suggestions of how we can improve, reduce friction, unblock obstacles, and improve the way in which skills provision can actually happen.
Okay, and just I sort of started with apprenticeships, but before we leave apprenticeships, level 7, there's no official announcement on level 7, but there's been some leaked information in the press about the plan to defund level 7s, except for young people up to the age of 21. You may or may not want to comment on that, but how does that sort of play into the demand that for a higher skilled economy? We heard from Sandra McNally earlier that we need high skilled roles in the economy, and some of that will be at level 7. And we've heard from an apprentice who's studying level 7. How do we navigate that and sort of marry those two challenges?
You know, I thought you might ask me about this. I think that's been very clear. Ministers have been very clear about their desire to see within, there isn't an ever-expanding pot of money within existing resources. Thinking about have we got the balance right between apprenticeships for those who are already established in their careers versus those who are starting out and at the beginning of their careers. So that's the context in which these decisions will be made and announced in due course. And I think that's probably all I can say on that at present. But I think hearing, and it's always brilliant to hear from apprentices in their lived experience. I think what's also interesting is trying to, when you look across other jurisdictions, and I think this may have come up earlier in your sessions this morning, what we traditionally haven't been so good at, I think, in this country is that missing middle of level 4 and 5 qualifications. So between level 3, A level, you know all this, you're all experts in training and levels, but between degree level and A level or T level or, end of school level, that kind of missing middle gap, what do we do collectively to try and improve the training and pathways in those pathways at level 4 and 5, because that seems to me key to some of this, and it feels as though that's resonating a bit with what we're hearing from individual firms and from sectors. But I think that might be quite a fruitful thing to explore together, I think, in future.
Okay, I'll come on to sort of working together in a moment, but can you tell us a little bit about how you plan to work at a regional level particularly? So having a national strategy around skills that aligns to industrial strategy with different sectors prioritised, for example, is one thing, but then delivery, a lot of the actual on-the-ground delivery of training and that collaboration with educational bodies, etc., happens at a regional and local level. How will Skills England navigate that and create those structures so that we have that flow through from national strategy to regional local delivery?
Yeah, it's really important, and I think it is a really important part of Skills England's remit and different from what's gone before. So Tessa and I are extremely lucky in that we have a brand new deputy CEO in the form of Gemma Marsh, who some of you may know from her work in Greater Manchester Combined Authority. So she's the skills lead, was until very recently the skills lead for Manchester. She's just joined us and has brought with her an incredible wealth of experience, 20 years working in a particular region with the devolution agenda and understanding really how things work on the ground. So from a Skills England perspective, one of the things that we are really keen to achieve is matching national priorities with regional and then local provision. So how do those align? How do they stack up to something which is a kind of sensible skills provision across the country? And so our work has already kicked off in conversations with the strategic authorities, with the mayors, with skills leads right across the country, across regions, not only to explain and share the kind of vision for what Skills England is going to do, but also to really understand what's working well in different regions. Because you can have a national strategy, but it needs to have regional flavours and then work at a local level for individual providers. And connecting those dots and making sure we have that right, I think, is really important.
Yeah, sounds like a challenge, but yeah, it's
challenge and
really important.
Like your theme today.
Absolutely. And staying with geography for a moment, we've got a question in about collaboration with devolved governments. You're Skills England, you're not Skills Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland and England. How will you manage that with the skills being a devolved matter?
Yes, skills policy obviously being devolved means that Skills England is Skills England. However, to reassure and to explain in a bit more detail, so we understand that many firms work right across the UK, and commercially, it doesn't make sense. It's annoying to have to talk to 4 different organisations about skills and provision. So one of the things that we're really keen to do is have very effective join up. And so over the last few months, we've already worked closely with our counterparts in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, to understand the areas of commonality, and there are a lot. There's a lot of sort of shared purpose, but also share what's working well. So we were talking earlier about some interesting things that are happening in Northern Ireland, and making sure we're learning the lessons from what's working best across the 4 nations, and bringing that together to inform the work of Skills England too. So there's behind the scenes. There's a lot of join up that maybe isn't as obvious from to the outside world, but we should celebrate that.
Okay, no, thank you. We're not running out of time, but I want to plough through as many questions as I can, because we've got them coming in, and also I can take some from the room as well if people have questions. You mentioned about the role of employers. How do you talked a lot about co-creation, collaboration? Can you tell us a bit more about how you see that working?
Definitely. So, so the theory, which I think I hope will bear out in practice, is we now have the data to understand where the skills gaps are. Unless we work with you and organisations in this room on financial services and related skills provision, we won't be able to fill those gaps. We won't be able to make sure those pathways work effectively. So we would be, I have to say, financial services and others in the room, you are amazingly well coordinated and brilliantly represented through people like Claire in conversations with government. So it feels as though it's a very good start to build on, if you like. I couldn't possibly comment on the other sectors, but this is fantastic. So I think what we would like to do is continue the conversations that we've been having already, and maybe pick some things that could be real game changers in terms of either different ways of doing provision, things that people are interested in relation to the Growth and Skills Levy offer, shorter, sharper, AI, digital, those sorts of areas, and focus on some things that we could work together on.
Okay, and also solutions that work for businesses of all sizes across all different parts of the economy, because everyone wants to work on skills. We've got some questions coming in. One, can you just say a little bit more about the taxonomy? I think Frank mentioned the taxonomy you're launching, and how you've developed it. I know we've had some of our members at the Commission involved in that.
Yeah, it's a really important piece of work. So I think we're very good at understanding occupational standards and routes through particular occupations and how to progress through those. what I think is interesting about the skills taxonomy, and Frank's sitting up now and he's going to tell me off if I get this wrong, is that we, through skills taxonomy, you can understand the building blocks across occupations. Mm-hmm. So whether that's digital, whether that's management or softer skills that cut across different occupations, mm-hmm. almost like the building blocks that you can pull together. So that's the skills taxonomy work, my basic understanding of it. Frank, if you would like to know more about it, we're short of time. Frank can give you the PhD version later on. But it's a really important, I think, to think about what cuts across and what those. So, when we talk to different industrial strategy sector colleagues, there are common themes across, whether that's need for greater digital training, need for greater AI understanding. It cuts right across different sectors. So something that can work in different occupations too, I think, is really important.
Okay, understood. Do we have any questions in the room? I've taken a few from the app already. Don't be shy. While you're thinking, I will. Oh, there's one over there, right by the microphone. Well done.
Hello. You mentioned there's the need for greater flexibility around the use of the levy. I just wondered if it was too early to give an indication whether that could be outside of apprenticeships or whether that's about introducing further flexibility into apprenticeships.
Really good question. So I think, as I mentioned, there's already flexibilities within apprenticeships that have been announced, whether that's through shorter foundation. Beyond that, I think it's an ask from you in the room. What is it that you would like? Mm-hmm. So we know we've heard very loud and clear more flexibility would be helpful. What we need to now get to is the next level of detail of what does that actually mean, mm-hmm. and then we can start the conversation about at that sort of level. So really open to hear your thoughts and views on that.
Okay, you might be having some people speak to you at lunchtime, definitely.
Good.
There's a few questions I've had in as well, which sort of relate to how skills and behaviours can be reflected through apprenticeships and more flexibility in structuring those. And also, I think coming back to the point about speed and agility, that, particularly with AI and new technologies, not tagging on. You've sort of been hearing that loud and clear, haven't you? And are we going to move quickly? Are we going to be agile when we move on decisions around flexibility?
I hope so. I think something that I was really interested in too in your report was that's published today around AI is how being super specialist in AI is only needed by a relatively small percentage of the workforce, but being kind of conversant and understanding enough for larger numbers of, probably everybody in organisations eventually. But also how the skills, the sort of human skills, if you like, about people management, empathy, and leadership are also still really playing out as very important. Yep. So that I will also take back, because I think sometimes that gets lost, and so your report has been really helpful in that.
Oh, good, glad to hear. Yeah, because we can sometimes talk about jobs and the hard skills, and actually the embedding. I think we heard that earlier. The embedding of technology is just as important. That will create the game-changing innovation and growth.
And when we look at things like the Unit for Future Skills, which Frank led, and the analysts that are now in Skills England have thought a lot about the impact of automation on different occupations, and I know you've looked at this too. So, but I think it's really important to, in the same breath that we talk about automation, valuing the human skills within different sectors is also incredibly important, isn't it?
Okay, absolutely. Is there anything from maybe more a personal point of view that you would like to sort of see change in the skills conversation nationally, that you think there's an area that we haven't quite landed yet in the skills conversation?
It's a really good question. So I think personally, the thing that I would really like to see is the simplification point. So it feels still quite a crowded landscape, and so and the sorts of conversations that I think have happened until recently have been, well, government needs to do this, or industry needs to do that, and actually the thing that would make the difference now is to say, okay, we collectively understand the problem, and this is how we're going to work on the solution.
Yep.
That would be the big step change, I think, for me and for Skills England.
Okay, good. Final question, because we are nearly out of time. What are you upskilling and reskilling yourself in at the moment? What are you learning? What's top of your list?
Really good question. So, so Tessa and I have taken our training and personal development through our joint career very seriously, and it's a really interesting conversation to have with somebody who has the same job as you. What do you think we need to do, and giving each other feedback. And one of the things that we've done recently is some training in systems leadership, which has been fascinating, really, really helpful. Outside of work, I have been doing some painting.
Okay. What, so, walls or landscapes? Or
landscapes,
yeah. Decorating or art?
Art.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And some walls, but prefer the other sorts,
We are out of time. I just want to say a huge thank you for joining us today. I'm sure that people will have questions in the break if you're around. So thank you very much for joining us, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks.